My name's Emily and I'm 32. Every morning I sip coffee from this chipped mug my dad Robert gave me when I was a kid. It's silly, but it reminds me of when I thought family meant safety. I spent years holding us together, believing love was enough. Then one phone call shattered that. Words I wasn't meant to hear cut deeper than I can say. How do you rebuild when the people you trust call you a burden, if you've ever felt that sting hit? Like, subscribe and tell me, where are you watching from? The sun was dipping low, casting a warm glow across my Portland living room. I sat at my desk, surrounded by sketches and a half-finished logo for a client. My house, this beautiful place I'd poured every penny into, felt like my sanctuary. Hardwood floors creaked softly and the garden outside bloomed with roses I'd planted myself. At 32, I was proud of it, a $980,000 home I owned outright. But tonight, that pride felt hollow. Dad and Sheila were sprawled on the couch laughing over some reality show. They'd been living with me for months, ever since their European trip burned through their savings. I didn't mind at first. They were family and family sticks together. I paid the bills, cooked dinners, even skipped a freelance conference to help them settle in. It was just what you do, right? I glanced at my phone, ready to call Dad about dinner plans. I'd been craving pizza, maybe a night to unwind. I dialed, but he didn't pick up. I figured he was distracted, so I left a voicemail. As I set the phone down, I heard his voice through the speaker. He hadn't hung up. "She's a burden, Sheila. Always has been. We're stuck here because of her." My stomach dropped. I froze, my hand hovering over my laptop. Sheila's voice chimed in, sharp and cold. "I know, Robert. She's got this house, but what's it worth if we're tied to her forever?" I sat there, breath caught in my throat as their words sank in. A burden. Me. The daughter who'd given up weekends to drive them to appointments, who'd paid their phone bills when they came up short. I'd thought I was helping, that they saw me as family, not some obligation. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. I shut my laptop, unable to focus. My eyes landed on a photo frame across the room, one I'd hung years ago. It was me and Dad at my high school graduation. His arm around me, both of us grinning like the world was ours. I was 17, so sure he was proud of me. When had that changed? When did I become the problem? I grabbed my phone hands, shaking, and ended the call. Part of me wanted to storm out there, demand answers, but my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I texted Hannah, my best friend, the one person who'd always had my back. "Can you talk? Something's wrong." She called in seconds. What's going on? You sound awful." I told her everything, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, like admitting them made them real. Hannah didn't hesitate. "That's garbage, Emily. You're not a burden. You've been carrying them for years. Confront them, now." "I don't know if I can," I said, staring at the closed door. "What if they leave? They're all I have." "They're not your family if they talk like that," she snapped. "You deserve better." Her words stung, but they also lit something in me. I thought about her life, raising her son alone, cutting off her toxic in-laws without a second thought. She was fearless, and I envied that. But confronting Dad and Sheila, the idea made my chest tight. They were my only tie to Mom, to the life we had before she died. Losing them felt like losing her all over again. I stood pacing my office, trying to make sense of it. The house was quiet now, the TV off. I heard Dad's footsteps in the kitchen, the clink of a glass. Normal sounds, like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just ripped my heart out. I sank into my chair, staring at that graduation photo. Had I missed the signs? Had they always felt this way and I was too blind to see it? My phone buzzed. Hannah again, texting, "You're stronger than you think. Don't let them walk over you." I wanted to believe her. But as I sat there, the weight of their words pressed harder. A burden. I wasn't ready to face them, not yet. But something was shifting inside me, a crack in the foundation I'd built my life on. I just didn't know how deep it would go. I slipped out of my office, tiptoeing to the kitchen where Dad was pouring himself a drink. Sheila was upstairs, her footsteps creaking overhead. The house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. I stood in the doorway watching Dad sip his whiskey, oblivious to the storm inside me. I wanted to ask him why to make him explain those words, but my throat tightened. Instead, I grabbed a glass of water and retreated to my room. Locking the door, I sat on my bed, the quilt Mom made when I was a kid bunched under me. It was one of the few things I had left of her, its faded patches, a map of better days. I pulled it around my shoulders, trying to steady myself. Hannah's text glowed on my phone, but I couldn't respond yet. My mind was racing, piecing together moments I'd ignored. Last month, Sheila had borrowed my credit card for groceries, but came back with a new handbag. Dad had laughed it off, saying she deserved nice things. I'd smiled, swallowing my frustration, because I thought we were a team. Now those memories felt like clues. Had they been using me all along? The thought made my chest ache, a dull pain that wouldn't quit. I opened my laptop, needing a distraction, and scrolled through old emails. One caught my eye from my cousin Nathan, sent after a family barbecue last summer. He'd written, "Your dad keeps talking about the house like it's his." Weird, right? I'd brushed it off then, assuming Nathan misheard. Now it hit differently. I dug deeper, finding a group chat with relatives where Dad had posted a photo of my garden, captioning it, "Our little paradise." Our, not mine. My hands clenched. This house, my house, was the result of years of late nights, freelance gigs, and saying no to trips with friends. I'd saved every dime, signed the papers alone, celebrated with a bottle of cheap wine on the empty floor. Dad and Sheila had clapped when I showed them the keys, but now I wondered if they'd seen dollar signs, not my pride. The next morning I woke early, my eyes gritty from sleeplessness. I heard Dad and Sheila in the dining room planning their day. I stayed in my room, avoiding them. When I finally emerged, Sheila was at the table, flipping through a travel magazine. "Emily, you look tired," she said, not looking up. "You should take better care of yourself." I mumbled something and grabbed my coffee, my hands unsteady. Dad was reading the paper, humming to himself. Their normalcy felt like a slap. I wanted to scream, to shake them and demand they admit what they'd said. But I didn't. I just stood there sipping my coffee, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Later, I drove to a nearby park, needing air. The trees were turning red, leaves crunching under my boots. I sat on a bench watching families laugh and kids chase each other. I envied their ease, their trust. My phone buzzed Hannah again, asking if I'd confronted them. I texted back, "Not yet. I'm scared." Her reply was instant. "You're not scared. You're angry. Use it." She was right. The anger was there, simmering, but so was the fear. If I called them out, what then? Would they leave? Apologize? Or worse, would they stay and pretend nothing happened? I thought of Mom, how she'd always told me to stand tall. I hadn't realized how much I'd been shrinking to keep them comfortable. Back home, I found a stack of bills on the counter, all in my name. Electric, internet, even their car insurance. I'd been paying it all, telling myself it was temporary. But temporary had stretched into years. I opened the fridge, noticing the fancy cheese Sheila loved, the kind I never bought for myself. Small things piling up, each one a reminder of how much I'd given. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Dad's words echoed sharper now, cutting through the excuses I'd made for them. A burden. I wasn't just hurt, I was waking up. Something had to change, and it started with me. I didn't know how, but I knew I couldn't stay silent much longer. The next few days were a blur, each one heavier than the last. I moved through my house like a ghost, avoiding Dad and Sheila as much as I could. Their presence grated on me now, every laugh, every casual comment slicing deeper. I kept my bedroom door locked, my safe space, but even that felt tainted. The quilt on my bed. Mom's quilt was my only comfort, its weight grounding me as I tried to make sense of the mess inside my head. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Sheila's new earrings sparkling as she chopped vegetables in my kitchen. Dad's fancy leather wallet tossed carelessly on the counter. They weren't struggling, not like they'd claimed when they moved in. I'd been so quick to open my home, my wallet, believing their sob story about bad investments and a tough economy. But now I saw the truth in their choices, the way they lived better than I did. One morning I was sorting laundry in the basement, the hum of the washing machine drowning out my thoughts. Sheila's designer jeans were in the pile, a brand I'd never dream of buying. I tossed them in my hands, shaking with a quiet rage. Upstairs, Dad called out, asking if I'd seen his new sunglasses. New. Everything was new with them, paid for by me. I didn't answer, just kept folding my jaw tight. That afternoon I met Hannah for coffee at a little shop downtown. The place was cozy with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh pastries. I slid into a booth, my hands wrapped around a steaming latte. Hannah leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "You look like you haven't slept in days, Em." "What's going on?" I told her about the earrings, the wallet, the sunglasses. My voice was low, steady, but inside I was boiling. "They're living like kings in my house, Hannah. And I'm the idiot footing the bill." She slammed her mug down, making the table shake. "That's not family, that's leeching. You've got to do something. Kick them out, today." I stared at my coffee, the foam swirling. "It's not that simple. They're all I have left of Mom. If I lose them, it's like losing her again." Hannah softened, but her voice was firm. "Your mom would hate seeing you like this. You're not losing her by standing up for yourself." Her words stuck with me, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I drove home, the city blurring past my mind, replaying every sacrifice I'd made. The time I skipped a gallery opening to pay their car loan. The weekends I spent fixing their old furniture instead of working on my portfolio. I told myself it was love, but now it felt like a trap. When I got back, Sheila was in the living room flipping through channels. She glanced up, her smile thin. "You're always so busy, Emily. You should relax sometime. Maybe date someone." The jab landed hard. I was single, sure, but not because I wanted to be. I'd put my life on hold for them, turning down dates to keep the house running. I forced a nod and headed to my office, my heart pounding. I sat at my desk, staring at a blank screen, unable to work. Instead, I pulled up my bank account. The numbers stared back at me, lower than they should have been. I scrolled through transactions, dinner subscriptions, even a spa day for Sheila. My money, their fun. I slammed my laptop shut, my breath ragged. I thought about my childhood after Mom died when I was 10. Dad was distant grieving, and Sheila stepped in all smiles and promises. I tried so hard to win her over, baking cookies, cleaning the house, anything to feel like I belonged. But I was always the extra piece, never quite fitting. By high school, I was working at a diner, saving for college, while Sheila redecorated their place with Dad's blessing. I told myself it was fine, that I was strong. But strong for who? That night I found a voicemail from my cousin Nathan. His voice was cheerful, clueless. "Hey Em, just checking in. Dad was telling everyone at Aunt Linda's party how nice your house is. Said it's basically his now since you're all living together. Proud of you for sharing." My stomach twisted. I played it again, then a third time, each word a fresh cut. Dad wasn't just using me, he was rewriting the story, painting himself as the generous patriarch of my home. I stood in my room, the walls lined with my art, my dreams, and felt a fury I didn't know I had. This wasn't just about money or words. It was about my life, my worth, and they were stealing both. I clutched my phone. Nathan's voicemail looping in my head. My house, my life reduced to a boast Dad used to impress relatives. I sank onto the floor, my back against the bed, the room spinning. The art on my walls, sketches I'd poured my soul into, seemed to mock me now. All those years of hustle, of building something mine, and he'd claimed it like a trophy. I wasn't just a burden, I was invisible. The next day, I forced myself to act normal, pouring coffee in the kitchen while Sheila scrolled her phone at the table. She didn't look up, just said, "We're out of almond milk again. You should grab some." Her tone was so casual, so entitled, it made my skin crawl. I nodded, biting my tongue, and left for work. But my mind wasn't on design. Every client email, every deadline felt pointless. What was I working for if it all went to them? At lunch, I sat in my car, parked outside the studio, staring at a sandwich I couldn't eat. I remembered a Christmas when I was 12 saving my babysitting money to buy Dad a watch. He'd hugged me, called me his best girl. Sheila had smiled, but later I found the watch in a drawer unused while she wore new bracelets. Even then I'd excused it, told myself I was too young to understand. Now at 32 I saw it clearly. They'd always taken more than I could give. Back home I found Sheila's journal on the coffee table, left open like she didn't care who saw. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate. This house is our ticket to a better life. Once we're settled, we can sell and start fresh. Sell my house. The one I'd paid for, sweated for, loved. My hands shook as I closed the journal, my heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it from the next room. I went to my office, locking the door, and pulled up my budget. I'd been so careful tracking every expense, but now I saw how much they'd bled me dry. A new TV they'd needed. A wine club subscription Dad swore was a one-time thing. My savings, once a safety net, were dwindling. I'd skipped a trip to Seattle last year, told myself I'd go later. Later never came, but their comfort did. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay under Mom's quilt, the fabric soft against my skin, and thought about her. She'd been the one to teach me to dream big, to save my allowance for art supplies. After she died, I'd clung to Dad, hoping to keep her light alive. But he'd moved on, and Sheila had filled the space Mom left. I'd spent my life trying to prove I was worth loving, but to them, I was just a means to an end. The next morning I overheard them in the backyard, their voices drifting through the open window. Dad was on the phone laughing. "Yeah, the house is perfect. We've got it made here." Sheila chimed in. "Just wait till we're set. Europe again, maybe?" I stood at the sink, dishes forgotten, my hands trembling in the soapy water. They weren't just using me, they were planning their future on my back. I dried my hands and walked to the mirror in my room. My reflection looked older, tired, the lines around my eyes deeper than they should be at 32. I thought of Hannah, her fire, her certainty. I wanted that strength, but all I felt was a crushing weight. Every choice I'd made, every dollar, every hour had been for them, and they were laughing, plotting while I drowned. By evening I was unraveling. I sat on my porch, the cool air sharp against my face, watching the neighborhood settle into dusk. Kids biked past, their laughter echoing. I envied their freedom, their trust in the world. My phone buzzed, another text from Nathan asking to visit soon. I didn't reply. How could I face him, knowing what Dad had said? Knowing they'd turned my home into their lie. The anger was there, but so was the grief, a heavy knot that wouldn't loosen. I couldn't keep pretending. The air in the house felt thick, like it was choking me. Every step Dad and Sheila took, every word they spoke, was a reminder of how little I meant to them. I'd spent days dodging their glances, swallowing my anger, but it was eating me alive. By Friday, I was a mess, barely sleeping, my sketches piling up untouched. I needed to do something, anything, to stop the spiral. So I decided to talk to them. Not a confrontation, not yet just a conversation, to see if I'd misheard, if there was any shred of love left. I waited until evening when the house was quiet. Dad was in the garage, tinkering with an old radio he'd found at a flea market. Sheila was in the guest room, folding clothes. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands unsteady, and walked to the garage. The smell of oil and sawdust hit me, memories of helping Dad with projects when I was a kid. I pushed them aside and cleared my throat. "Dad, can we talk?" My voice was softer than I wanted, but I held his gaze. He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sure, Em. What's up?" His tone was light, like we were chatting about the weather. I took a breath, my heart hammering. "I've been feeling off lately. Like maybe I'm not pulling my weight around here. Do you ever feel like I'm in the way?" His face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He set the radio down, leaning against the workbench. "You're not in the way, kid. You're family. We're all just figuring it out together." It sounded nice, but it felt hollow. I pressed on, my voice shaking. "I heard you on the phone last week. You said I was a burden, that you're stuck here because of me." The garage went still. Dad's jaw tightened, and for a second I thought he'd apologize, explain it away. Instead, he sighed like I'd annoyed him. You were eavesdropping. That's not fair, Emily. You took it out of context. Context. My voice cracked. You called me a burden, Dad. How do I take that any other way? He crossed his arms, his face hardening. You're too sensitive. Always have been. Sheila and I are grateful for the house, but let's be real, you wouldn't have us anywhere else. We raised you. You owe us this much. My breath caught like he'd punched me. Owe them I'd paid their bills, given up my freedom, my dreams to keep them comfortable. I stood there, water glass trembling in my hand, searching his face for the dad who'd carried me on his shoulders, who'd cheered at my art shows. He was gone. Before I could respond, Sheila's voice cut through from the doorway. What's going on out here? She stepped into the garage, her eyes narrowing as she looked between us. Emily's upset about something she overheard Dad said, his tone dismissive. Thinks we don't appreciate her. Sheila's lips pursed and she crossed her arms, mimicking Dad. Oh, please. You're living in this big house, Emily, and we're the ones making it a home. You should be thankful we're here. Most kids would kill for parents who stick around. I stared at her, my mind reeling. A home. They'd turned my sanctuary into their playground, spending my money, claiming my space. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. My chest was tight. My vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. That's not true. I managed my voice barely above a whisper. This is my house. I bought it. I pay for everything. And you think I owe you? Sheila laughed, a sharp cutting sound. Your house. It's family property now. We live here too. You can't just act like it's all yours. Dad nodded like they'd rehearsed this. She's right, Em. We're in this together. You need to stop being so selfish. Selfish. The word hit like a slap. I'd given them everything, my money, my time, my heart, and they were twisting it, making me the villain. I turned away, my water glass slipping from my hand. It hit the concrete floor, shattering into pieces, the sound echoing in the silence. I didn't stop to clean it up. I walked past Sheila, past Dad's workbench, and into the house, my pulse roaring in my ears. In my room, I locked the door and sank onto the floor, my back against the bed. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in gasps. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd rewritten our story, made me the problem for daring to exist. I pulled Mom's quilt around me, desperate for something real, something that didn't hurt. But even that couldn't stop the flood. I was done hoping for their love. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a paycheck. I sat there, Mom's quilt draped over my shoulders, my breath shallow. The house was silent, but the echo of Dad and Sheila's words filled every corner. Selfish. Owe them. Family property. My room, once my haven, felt like a cage. I wanted to scream, to tear down the walls, but I was paralyzed, drowning in the weight of their betrayal. I didn't know how much more I could take, but the universe wasn't done with me yet. The next morning, I dragged myself to the kitchen, hoping to avoid them. My eyes were puffy, my head throbbing from crying. I just wanted coffee and quiet. But Sheila was already there, slicing fruit with a knife that glinted under the morning light. She glanced up, her smile tight. Rough night, Emily. You really need to lighten up. I ignored her, reaching for the coffee pot. My hands were unsteady and I spilled some on the counter. Sheila sighed loud and dramatic. Careful. This kitchen's a mess as it is. You're not exactly pulling your weight around here. I froze the pot, clattering against the mug. Pulling my weight. My voice was low, barely controlled. I pay for this house. Every bill, every grocery, every single thing. She set the knife down, her eyes narrowing. And we're grateful, but don't act like you're some saint. We've given up a lot to be here, keeping you company. You'd be lost without us. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Her words were a twisted mirror reflecting a reality where I was the one in debt. Before I could respond, Dad walked in, his phone in hand. What's the issue now? He asked like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Sheila thinks I'm not doing enough, I said, my voice shaking. After everything I've given you, Dad rolled his eyes, tossing his phone on the table. Here we go again. You're blowing this out of proportion, Emily. We're a family. Stop keeping score. I stared at him, my heart sinking further. Family. The word had lost all meaning. I turned to leave, but Sheila's voice stopped me. You know, maybe if you weren't so focused on yourself, you'd see how hard this is for us. We're stuck in your house, putting our lives on hold. Stuck. There it was again, that word from the phone call. My hands clenched, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to yell to tell them to leave, but the front doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. I walked to the door, grateful for the escape, but my stomach dropped when I saw who it was. My cousin Nathan stood there, a grin on his face, holding a bottle of wine. Surprise thought I'd swing by for a visit. His cheerfulness was a jarring contrast to the storm inside me. I forced a smile, letting him in, but my mind was racing. He didn't know about the fight, the voicemail, any of it. Dad clapped Nathan on the back, all smiles. Good to see you, kid. Come on, let's open that wine. Sheila joined in, her voice suddenly warm, like we hadn't just been at each other's throats. I stood there watching them play the perfect hosts, my house, their stage. We sat in the living room, the wine poured into glasses I'd bought for a party I never threw. Nathan chatted about his job, his new apartment, oblivious to the undercurrent. Then he turned to Dad, his tone casual. So Uncle Robert, you were saying at Aunt Linda's, how this place is yours now? That's wild, man. How'd you pull that off? The room went still. My glass stopped halfway to my lips. Nathan kept talking, unaware. I mean, Emily's doing great, but you said it's like a family estate or something. Pretty cool. Dad laughed a little too loud. Oh, you know, just joking around. This is home for all of us. Sheila nodded, sipping her wine, but her eyes darted to me, sharp and warning. I set my glass down, my hands trembling. Nathan's words were a match, igniting everything I'd been holding back. They weren't just lying to me, they were lying to everyone, claiming my life as their own. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to correct Nathan, to admit the truth. But he didn't. He just smiled like it was nothing. Joking, I said, my voice cutting through the room. You told everyone this is your house. That I'm just, what, a guest in my own life. Nathan's smile faltered. Wait. What's going on? Dad's face hardened. Don't make a scene, Emily. You're embarrassing yourself. Sheila leaned forward, her voice dripping with pity. She's been stressed, Nathan. Overreacting to everything. It's sad, really. I stood my chair, scraping against the floor. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a rage so raw it scared me. They were rewriting me, erasing me in front of my own cousin. My house, my work, my heart, none of it mattered to them. I was a prop, a stepping stone, and they'd parade their lie to anyone who'd listen. I turned to Nathan, my voice shaking but clear. This is my house. I bought it. I pay for it. They don't own a single brick. I looked at Dad, at Sheila, their faces frozen. You're not my family. You're thieves. The silence was deafening. Nathan stared, wide-eyed, the wine forgotten. Dad's mouth opened, but no words came. Sheila's smile was gone, replaced by a cold glare. I walked out, my legs unsteady, and locked myself in my room. I collapsed against the door, my breath ragged, my heart shattered. They'd taken everything, my trust, my home, my worth, and left me with nothing but the truth I couldn't unhear. I stayed in my room all night, the door locked. Mom's quilt pulled tight around me. My words to Dad and Sheila, calling them thieves, echoed in my head. I'd said it finally, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like I'd burned the last bridge to the family I'd spent my life chasing. By morning, my eyes were dry, my chest hollow. But something new stirred inside me, a quiet, stubborn spark. I couldn't keep living like this. I wouldn't. I heard Dad and Sheila moving around the house, their voices low, probably plotting how to spin last night to Nathan. I didn't care. I sat at my desk, staring at the sketches pinned to my wall, each one a piece of me they'd never touched. I was 32, and I'd built this life, my house, my career, despite their weight. They didn't get to claim it anymore. I grabbed my laptop and searched for realtors in Portland. My fingers hesitated over the keys, but I kept going. I found Lauren a woman with a no-nonsense bio and glowing reviews. Her website said she specialized in quick, discreet sales. Perfect. I emailed her, my heart pounding, asking for a consultation about selling my house. I didn't mention Dad or Sheila, just that I needed to move fast. While I waited for a reply, I opened my banking app. The shared account I'd let Dad access for emergencies stared back at me, drained lower than I'd realized. I clicked through transactions, coffee runs, clothing stores, even a deposit for their next European trip. My trip, the one I'd planned to take alone to clear my head, had been scrapped for their whims. Not anymore. I called my bank, voice steady, and opened a new account in my name only. The teller, a kind woman named Joyce, walked me through transferring my savings. "You sound like you're starting fresh," she said. I laughed, a brittle sound. Something like that. By the time I hung up, my money was safe, untouchable. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Lauren emailed back within the hour, offering to meet that afternoon. I agreed, picking a cafe across town where I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. Before leaving, I slipped into the living room. Dad was reading a magazine, Sheila scrolling her phone. They didn't look up. I grabbed a small box from the shelf, one I'd kept since Mom died. Inside was a letter she'd written me, tucked away for years. I didn't open it yet. I wasn't ready, but I needed it close. At the cafe, Lauren was already there. Her laptop open, a warm smile on her face. She was in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm energy that put me at ease. "So, Emily," she said, sipping her tea, "tell me about this house you want to sell." I took a deep breath and laid it out, the $980,000 property, my pride in owning it and my need to let it go. I didn't mention Dad and Sheila's betrayal, just that I was ready for a change. Lauren nodded, taking notes. "It's a hot market," she said. "We can list it quietly off-market and have offers in days." "But are you sure selling a home is big?" I thought of Dad's smirk, Sheila's pitying tone, the way they'd called my house theirs. I'm sure I said, my voice firm for the first time in weeks. Lauren didn't push, just handed me a contract outline and promised to start the process. As I signed, a weight lifted like I was stepping out of a shadow. Driving home, I felt a flicker of power, something I hadn't known I still had. I wasn't just running, I was choosing. The house, their safety net, would be gone, and I'd be the one to pull it out from under them. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to make sure every step was mine, every choice deliberate. This was my life, and I was taking it back one move at a time. Back at the house, I moved with purpose, my steps lighter than they'd been in months. Dad and Sheila were out, probably at some lunch they didn't pay for, and the quiet gave me space to think. I sat in my office, the box with Mom's letter on my desk. I opened it now, my fingers tracing her familiar handwriting. "Live for yourself, Emily," she'd written. "Your heart is enough." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. For the first time, I believed her. I called Mark, a lawyer Hannah recommended, and set up a meeting for the next day. I needed to be sure the house sale was ironclad, that Dad and Sheila couldn't claim a dime. Then I started packing. Not everything, just what mattered, my sketchbooks. Mom's quilt, a few clothes. I found a small apartment online, a sunny studio downtown, and submitted an application. The idea of a fresh start, a space that was mine alone, made my chest hum with possibility. That evening, I went through the house, cataloging what was theirs. Dad's golf clubs in the garage, Sheila's designer coats in the hall closet. I didn't touch them, but I noted every item. They'd have their things, but nothing more. In the kitchen, I found a notepad and started writing a letter, not to send, but to focus my thoughts. "You called me a burden," I wrote. "But I'm done carrying you." I stopped there, tucking it away. It wasn't ready yet. Mark's office was small, tucked above a bookstore with shelves of legal texts and a view of the city. He was in his 50s, calm and direct, with a handshake that felt like a promise. I told him about the house, the sale, and my need to protect myself. I didn't mention the burden comment, just that my family might contest the sale. He nodded, flipping through my deed. "It's in your name, Emily. They have no claim. I'll draft a notice to vacate just in case." "Vacate?" I asked, my stomach twisting. The word sounded so final. "They're tenants, legally speaking," he said. You've been generous, but you're not obligated to house them. This protects you if they push back. I signed the papers, my hands steady. Walking out, I felt taller, like I'd reclaimed a piece of ground they'd stolen. Back home, I got a call from Lauren. The house had an offer, $980,000 cash, closing in a week. I said yes without hesitation. She promised to keep it quiet. No signs, no open houses. Dad and Sheila wouldn't know until it was done. Late that night, I stood in my garden, the roses glowing under the moonlight. I'd planted them after moving in a promise to myself to build something beautiful. Now I was letting them go, but not my strength. I thought of Mom, how she'd fought cancer with quiet grace, never letting it dim her love for me. I'd been living for Dad and Sheila, trying to earn a place in their world. But Mom's world, her belief in me, was the one I wanted to honor. I went inside and found Sheila's jewelry box in the guest room, left open as usual. Mom's old necklace, a simple silver chain with a tiny star, was tangled among Sheila's gaudy rings. She'd worn it like it was hers, and I'd never said a word. I took it now, slipping it into my pocket. At my desk, I called a local women's shelter and arranged to donate it along with some clothes I'd outgrown. It wasn't about spite. It was about giving Mom's memory to someone who'd cherish it. The next morning, I stood in my office, the sale contract in my hand. Lauren had emailed the final details and my apartment application was approved. I'd move out tomorrow, leaving Dad and Sheila's world behind. I grabbed the notepad again, finishing the letter I'd started. Surprise. A burden did this. I wrote, my pen steady. I folded it, tucking it into an envelope. It would stay on the counter when I left, a quiet truth they couldn't ignore. I looked around my office, the walls still lined with my art. I wasn't the girl who'd begged for their approval anymore. I was Emily, 32, and I was enough. I picked up Mom's letter, holding it close, and stepped into the hallway. The house was still, but I wasn't. I closed the door behind me, my heart steady, and walked toward the future I was building, one choice at a time. I woke up in my new apartment, the studio's bare walls glowing with early light. My few boxes were stacked in the corner, Mom's quilt folded on the bed. The silence was strange. No creaking floors or Dad's morning cough. I'd moved out yesterday, leaving the house behind with that note on the counter. Surprise, a burden did this. I hadn't looked back. Now at 32, I sat on the floor sipping tea from a new mug, waiting for the fallout. My phone stayed quiet all morning. No calls, no texts. I'd expected Dad or Sheila to blow up my inbox demanding answers, but the silence was louder. I checked the sale status with Lauren. The buyers had signed, funds were transferring, and the house was officially gone. I exhaled, a mix of relief and dread settling in. They'd be back from Europe tomorrow, walking into a reality I'd rewritten. I spent the day unpacking, hanging a single drawing, a self-portrait from college, all bold lines and quiet eyes. It felt like meeting myself again. But my mind kept drifting to them, imagining their faces when they found the locks changed. Would they scream, cry, or just stand there stunned? I didn't know which I wanted more. By afternoon, I needed air. I walked to a park near my building, the July heat sticking to my skin. Families picnicked on the grass, their laughter a world away from mine. I sat under an oak tree, pulling out my sketch pad. I drew the tree's gnarled roots, each line grounding me. My phone buzzed and my stomach tightened. It was Nathan, not Dad. "Hey Em, just heard you moved. What's going on? Call me." I didn't call back. Nathan was sweet, but he was part of their orbit, carrying their stories without questioning. I couldn't explain this yet, not when I was still piecing myself together. Instead, I sketched faster, the pencil digging into the page. The roots became a tangle, a mess of strength and struggle like me. Back at the apartment, I got a voicemail from Clara, my old neighbor. Her voice was soft, concerned. "Emily, I saw movers at your house today. Everything okay? Let me know if you need to talk." I smiled, grateful for her kindness, but didn't reply. Clara had her own life, her own losses. I couldn't lean on her now. That night I cooked for myself a simple pasta with herbs from a pot I'd bought. The act felt radical, like I was feeding someone new. But as I ate, the quiet grew heavy. I kept checking my phone, bracing for their call. Nothing. It was unsettling, this void where their anger should have been. Had they even landed yet? Or were they plotting, waiting to strike? I lay in bed, the city humming outside my window. I thought of Mom, how she'd faced her illness with a calm I never understood. She'd never begged for love, never let anyone dim her light. I wanted that now, but the ache was still there, a bruise that pulsed with every thought of Dad and Sheila. I'd taken my life back, but at what cost? The house was gone, my ties to them severed, and yet I felt tethered to their silence, waiting for the moment they'd realize what I'd done. I stood by the vase of lilies, their scent sharp in the small apartment. Sheila's voicemail waited on my phone, a silent grenade. I didn't play it. Instead, I grabbed my keys and left, needing to move to keep the world from closing in. The Portland streets were alive, couples, strolling, buses humming, but I felt like I was underwater, every sound muffled by the weight of what I'd done. At a corner store, I bought a notebook, its cover plain blue, and sat at a bench nearby. I started writing, not a letter this time, but a list. Things I'd lost: the house, my savings, the family I thought I had. Things I'd gained: this apartment, my art, a chance to start over. The list was short, but it steadied me, each word a brick in a new foundation. My phone buzzed again, Dad this time. I let it ring, watching the screen until it went dark. When I finally checked, Sheila's voicemail was short, her voice tight. Emily, what have you done? We're at the house. It's empty. Call us. Now. Dad's was longer, angrier. This is low even for you. You can't just throw us out. We're your family. I deleted, both my thumbs steady, but my chest ached. Family. They still use that word like it meant something. I walked home, the notebook tucked under my arm. Inside, I found a text from Nathan. Dad and Sheila called me, freaking out. Said you sold the house. What's happening? I didn't reply. He'd hear their version first, twisted to make me the villain. I pictured them in a motel, their suitcases piled in a corner. Sheila's face pinched, Dad pacing. Part of me wanted to feel sorry, but it passed. They'd built this mess as much as I had. Later, I called Mark, my lawyer, to check on the sale. His voice was calm, professional. Funds are in your account. The buyers take possession tomorrow. Your parents have no legal standing. You're clear. I thanked him, hanging up, and checked my bank. The $980,000 was there, a number so big it felt unreal. I transferred it to my new account, safe from their reach. It wasn't about the money, it was about taking back what was mine. That evening, I sat on my balcony, a tiny square overlooking the city. The lights blinked below, each one a life I'd never know. I thought of Clara, my neighbor, who'd probably seen them at the house, confused by the movers. I wondered if she'd tell me later, her voice gentle, offering tea. But I didn't want tea. I wanted to feel this, the raw edge of what I'd done. Another call came, Sheila again. I didn't answer, but the buzzing grated, a reminder they weren't done. I pictured them at the house, trying their key, finding my note. Surprise? A burden did this. Had they crumpled it, kept it? I'd never know, and that was the point. I'd stopped waiting for their approval, their regret. But the silence after the calls, the absence of their voices, was its own kind of wound. I went inside, pulling out the notebook. I added one more line, I'm enough. It felt true, but fragile, like a seed I wasn't sure would grow. I thought of Mom, her strength in those final days, how she'd smiled despite the pain. I'd sold the house to free myself, but the cost was this ache, this quiet that wasn't peace. They were out there reeling, and I was here holding the pieces of a life I didn't yet understand. I set the notebook down and looked at the lilies, their petals curling slightly. The apartment was mine, but it felt empty, the weight of their absence heavier than I'd expected. I'd won in a way, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, the ground gone, nothing left to hold on to but myself. The morning light slipped through my apartment's thin curtains, painting stripes across the hardwood floor. I sat cross-legged on a woven rug I'd bought at a flea market, a cup of chamomile tea cooling in my hands. At 32, I was learning to love these quiet moments, the kind I'd never had in the old house. The chaos of Dad and Sheila felt distant like a storm that had passed. I wasn't healed, not yet, but I was breathing easier, and that was something. I'd been in the studio for a week now, slowly making it mine. A secondhand bookshelf stood against one wall filled with novels and art journals I'd collected over the years. I'd hung a single photo, one of me at 25, laughing at a beach bonfire with friends I'd lost touch with. It reminded me I'd had a life before them and I could have one again. Today was Saturday and I had no plans. For the first time, that felt like freedom, not loneliness. I pulled on a sweater and walked to a nearby bakery, the air crisp with early fall. The shop was small with a bell that jingled as I stepped in. I ordered a croissant and sat by the window watching people pass, runners, parents with strollers, an old man with a dog. Life kept moving, and I was part of it, not just watching from the sidelines. Back home, I opened my sketch pad. Not to work, but to play. I drew the bakery's window the way the glass caught the light, the smudges from curious kids' hands. My lines were looser now, less afraid of mistakes. I thought about the years I'd spent perfecting designs for clients, always chasing approval. I'd been so busy proving my worth to Dad, to Sheila, to myself, that I'd forgotten how to create for joy. My phone buzzed, pulling me back. It was Hannah asking if I wanted to meet for lunch. I smiled, texting back a yes. She'd been my anchor through this, her fierce loyalty, a light in the dark. I grabbed my bag and headed to a diner we loved, its neon sign flickering in the daylight. Hannah was already there, her hair in a messy bun, her son's drawing taped to her water bottle. "You look good, Em," she said as I slid into the booth. "Like really good." I laughed, a real laugh, something I hadn't heard from myself in months. "I'm trying. It's weird being on my own, but I like it." She leaned forward, her eyes bright. "You're not on your own. You've got me. And you're killing it. That apartment, the sale. You did that?" Her words warmed me, but they also stirred a question I'd been avoiding. Was I enough without them? Without the house, the role I'd played for Dad and Sheila? I didn't say it out loud, but Hannah seemed to sense it. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You don't need their permission to be happy." "You never did." We ate, talking about her son's school, my latest sketch, anything but the past. For an hour, I was just Emily, not the daughter who'd lost everything. Walking back to my apartment, I felt lighter, like I'd left a piece of the old weight behind. The city hummed around me, and I let myself hum with it, my steps steady on the cracked sidewalk. At home, I sat by the window, the skyline a mix of gray and gold. I thought about Mom, not with the usual ache, but with a quiet gratitude. She'd given me her stubbornness, her love for small things, a good book, a warm drink, a moment alone. I'd spent so long trying to fill her absence with Dad's approval, but maybe she'd been with me all along in the way I kept going. I picked up my sketch pad again, drawing the skyline now, each building a story I didn't need to know. The pencil felt right in my hand, an extension of something true. I wasn't fixed, and I didn't need to be. I was here in this moment, and that was enough for today. I spent the afternoon tidying my apartment, arranging books, and wiping down the single counter in my tiny kitchen. Each small act felt like a promise, a way to claim this space as home. At 32, I was starting to see myself not as the daughter who'd failed Dad and Sheila, but as a woman who could build something new. The thought was fragile, but it held me steady like a candle in a dark room. I found a flyer in my mailbox for a pottery class at a community center nearby. On a whim, I signed up, the idea of shaping clay with my hands pulling me forward. The first session was that evening, and I walked there as the sun dipped low, the sky streaked with pink. The center was a low brick building, warm light spilling from its windows. Inside, a dozen people gathered around wooden tables, their chatter soft and welcoming. The instructor, a woman named Tessa with clay-dusted hands, showed me to a wheel. "Just feel it," she said, her voice calm. "Let the clay tell you what it wants to be." I sat the wheel, spinning, my fingers tentative at first. The clay was cool, yielding, and for the first time in weeks my mind quieted. I shaped a small bowl, uneven but honest, its curves a map of my effort. When I finished, Tessa smiled. "That's a good start. Keep going." I walked home with the bowl wrapped in cloth, my hands still carrying the earthy scent. In my apartment, I set it on the windowsill where it caught the city's glow. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, a tiny piece of something I'd made without anyone's permission. I thought of the house I'd sold, the roses I'd left behind. They were beautiful, but they'd anchored me to a life that wasn't mine. This bowl, this moment felt truer. Later, I got a letter in the mail forwarded from the old address. It was from Dad, a single page in his slanting script. I stood by my sink, the paper heavy in my hands. "Emily," it read, "we need to talk. You can't keep running. We're struggling. Help us. No apology, no regret, just a demand wrapped in familiar guilt." I read it twice, waiting for the old pull to kick in, the need to fix them. It didn't come. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, not to keep but to close. I didn't owe him a response, or Sheila, or the version of family they'd sold me. I thought of Tessa's words, "Let the clay tell you what it wants to be." I was shaping myself now, not for them, but for the woman I was becoming. That was enough. I sat on my couch, a thrift store find with a soft green blanket draped over it. The city buzzed outside, but inside I was still. I thought of Mom's laughter, how it used to fill our old apartment before she got sick. I'd spent so long chasing that warmth in Dad, but maybe it had always been in me waiting. I didn't need to prove it to anyone. I pulled out my sketch pad, not to draw, but to write. Just one line: "I am my own home." I set the pen down, my breath slow, and looked at the bowl on the sill. The world was wide, and I was ready to meet it, not as a burden, but as Emily, whole and unafraid. The quiet wrapped around me, soft as a sigh, and I let it hold me. A year had passed since I left the house behind, and I was 33 now, sitting on the floor of my new condo, a modest place I'd bought with the sale money. The walls were painted a soft blue, my choice, and a small wooden table held a vase of daisies I'd picked up on a whim. I'd spent the morning unpacking the last of my things, each item a step toward a life that felt like mine. The chaos of Dad and Sheila was a memory, not a weight, and I was learning to live without it. My days had a rhythm now. I woke early, made coffee in a French press I'd splurged on, and worked on freelance projects from a desk by the window. I'd started saying yes to things: dinners with Hannah, gallery openings, even a hiking trip with coworkers. I wasn't the Emily who'd hidden in her office, afraid to disappoint. I was someone new, or maybe someone I'd always been finally free to show up. I'd heard through Nathan that Dad and Sheila had moved into a small apartment across town. They'd stopped calling after a few months, their voicemails fading from demands to silence. I didn't know if they'd read my unsent letter, the one I'd written to let go of the pain. I didn't need to. I'd stopped waiting for their apologies, their change of heart. That was their story, not mine. One evening I joined a book club at the library, a group of strangers who became friends over dog-eared novels and cheap wine. We met in a cozy room with mismatched chairs, talking about stories that cracked us open. Last week we read a book about a woman who rebuilt her life after loss. I didn't share my own story, but I listened, nodding, feeling seen in a way I hadn't expected. Afterward, I walked home under streetlights, the night air cool my steps unhurried. I started running too, not to escape, but to feel my strength. The park near my condo had a loop that wound past a pond where ducks glided in the mornings. I'd jog there at dawn, my breath steady, the world quiet, except for my shoes on the path. It wasn't about being fast or perfect, it was about showing up for myself day after day. I'd come home, shower, and sketch what I'd seen: the water's ripples, a duck's tilted head, small things that held me together. Hannah came over one Sunday, bringing her son, who raced around my condo with a toy plane. We cooked tacos, laughing as salsa splattered the counter. She looked at me, her eyes soft. "You're different, Em. Like you're not carrying the world anymore." I smiled, stirring the beans, and realized she was right. I wasn't fixed, but I was lighter, the old wounds scabbing over, leaving scars I could live with. I kept up with the pottery class, my hands more confident now. Tessa, the instructor, had become a friend, her quiet encouragement a balm. I'd made a set of plates, their edges uneven but sturdy, and used them for dinners alone or with guests. Each meal felt like a small victory, a reminder that I could create without needing anyone's approval. I thought of Mom sometimes, how she'd loved cooking for me, her hands quick and sure. I was carrying that forward in my own way. I stood at my window now, the city stretching out below, its lights steady in the dusk. I wasn't the girl who'd begged for love, who'd given everything to feel enough. I was Emily, and this life imperfect small mine was enough. I breathed in the air cool and let the quiet settle, knowing the past was behind me. But there was still something left to say. I started writing again, not sketches or lists, but stories. At night after work, I'd sit at my table with a notebook, letting words spill out fragments of my childhood dreams. I'd forgotten moments that shaped me. It wasn't for anyone else, just me, a way to map the woman I was becoming. At 33, I realized I didn't need Dad or Sheila's validation to tell my story. I was the author now, and that power felt like coming home. One afternoon, I visited a community garden a few blocks from my condo. I'd signed up to volunteer, drawn to the idea of growing something from nothing. The plot was small, a patchwork of raised beds, where neighbors tended herbs and flowers. I knelt in the dirt, planting basil seeds, the soil cool under my fingers. An older man named Leo worked nearby, humming as he weeded. He told me about his daughter, estranged for years, and how he'd learned to love her from afar without expecting her to change. His words stuck with me, a quiet mirror to my own path. I thought about Dad and Sheila, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of clarity. They'd hurt me, taken from me, but I didn't need to carry their choices. I could let them go, not out of weakness, but because my heart deserved space for better things. I didn't hate them, I pitied them, their world so small it needed my life to feel big. That was their loss, not mine. I kept running my park loop now, a ritual. One morning I stopped by the pond, watching a heron stand still in the water, patient and sure. I envied its calm, its trust in the moment. I'd spent so long running from pain, trying to prove I was enough. But standing there, my breath fogging in the cool air, I realized I didn't need to prove anything. I was enough, not because of what I gave or lost, but because I chose to keep going, to build a life that held me. The book club became my anchor, our discussions peeling back layers of who I was. One night, a woman named Sarah shared how she'd walked away from a toxic job, finding peace in small acts, baking bread, calling her mom, forgiving herself. I nodded, seeing my own journey in hers. We were all mending, not with grand gestures, but with quiet choices, the kind that added up to a life worth living. I didn't need the old house or the family I'd thought defined me. I'd found family in Hannah's laughter, Tessa's steady hands, Leo's stories, Sarah's courage. They weren't bound by blood, but by something stronger, understanding presence, the willingness to show up. I'd learned that love isn't owed, and it doesn't demand your soul. It's a gift, and I was learning to give it to myself first. I stood in my condo now, the daisies on my table catching the evening light. I'd hung a new drawing, a simple line sketch of the heron, its stillness a reminder of what I'd found. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't need to be. I was Emily, and my story was mine to write, one day, one choice at a time. What's a moment you chose yourself even when it hurt? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. It's how we find each other, how we heal. If this resonated, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to finding our way together, one step at a time.